Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru, welcome to our next episode. We are still going through the autobiography of a yogi, line by line. We have reached quite a while ago, chapter 8. We're still talking about Jagadish Chandra Bose. And now we are at the fourth part of chapter 8. And we have an amazing guest today. Hey, Reva, how are you doing?
I wouldn't quite refer to myself as an amazing guest, but I'm doing good. I'm not a very well prepared guest, as I've been told in the preamble by Priyank.
Yeah, Priyank is a very strict disciplinarian, but it's okay. I think you passed all of his tests.
I'm sure out of all of the gurus, he feels most a kinship with Swami Yukteswar.
Definitely most scared of him for sure.
Me
in
too.
A good way. Yeah, in a motivating way. Like,
yeah.
I better do my EEs because otherwise, like that.
Did you do them this morning, Mike? Yet?
I did not. No, I must say, I did not. Yeah, I know. I have a picture there, so I'm like.
I'm waiting for the day that when I ask this random question, you say yes.
One day it will happen. It will happen. Definitely. So we're in the middle of the chapter, chapter 8. We're talking about the Bengali scientist Jagadish Chandra Bose, and we have talked about him in the last 3 parts already. And now we have Mukunda actually at his lab. So he invited him, and he's at the research center. And Mukunda is fascinated about the laboratory, right? He sees that, and the first thing you notice is there's a real, I would say, maybe an awe, or maybe at least an admiration for science and the scientific methods that he is using. And you likened it a bit to entering maybe the house of a guru, Priyank, right? When he got in there.
Yeah, it has that certain feel as well, especially when he used mindful of his promise, because he must have promised him a while ago that you can come to my place. And usually people just say these things, don't they? But he actually meant it and stuck to it. And it reminded me of the promise that our gurus give us. If we're faithful to our practices, then essentially we'll get all the spiritual help that we'll need.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if we stay in the same metaphor, he's like a guru of science. I don't know. We talked about this in other episodes that we shouldn't use the word guru in this way, but it is like that. He's in his domain here, Dr. Bose, and so then he starts turning on this crescograph, and he puts a fern before it, and the first thing that he says is that it magnifies the fern in a way that you can actually see the fern as a living being. You see it move, you see its reactions. Guruji compares it. He said if you would put a snail in front of the crescograph, it would go fast like an express train. So it magnifies the movements. And usually when we look at a plant, we think it's of it. I don't want to say an object, but definitely not something that is moving, that is interacting, right? But here it does. And then you have to set up, and then he starts interacting with the plant. So the first thing that he does is he takes a metal rod and holds it to the plant. And I don't know, that didn't occur to me. I thought if I take a metal rod, hold it to my plant wouldn't mind. The same way I wouldn't mind. Or like when I take a metal rod and I take it in my hand, makes no difference. But this plant was not happy about that. This plant kind of became very slow, shut down, and was maybe it was shy. That's also something that is coming through here. Like plants are not only reacting, but they also seem to have some kind of emotional reaction to things. So maybe when you have a plant in your house, maybe you have to first make friends with your plants, and then they kind of warm up to you after a while.
Those environmentalists that get bad press calling them tree huggers, I'm guessing that was something that's actually useful for plants and trees and animals.
Hugging them, yes. You think a tree likes a good hug? I guess so. Right? Who doesn't like a good hug?
Who's
Sure.
hugged a tree before?
I have.
Yeah.
We all have. Maybe that's a prerequisite to be on Guruji's on Guruji's path. Listeners, if you haven't hugged a tree, get outside, find a tree.
Yes.
Preferably
Yep.
do it when lots of people are watching as well, so they can join you.
To make a statement. Ever the tree hugger. Yeah. Be loving to your plants. It has an effect on them. Maybe it would actually be beneficial if we all had Cresco in our houses and we could look at our plants and interact. I would find that would maybe make it motivate us much more to interact more with our plants if we saw that it actually has an effect that we can see. I found that very interesting. Unfortunately, if you care a lot about plants, the way this continues here is a bit dark. So he goes on, and so we said already the metal rod, the plant is not happy about the metal rod, but then he removes the metal rod again, and then the plant continues with its movements. And Priyan?
Eloquent rhythms, he calls them, which is a really nice word, isn't it? It reminds me of if you have like a magnified and slowed down version of like ice crystals forming. You get this kind of like really cool eloquent rhythms going outwards from the point of where the cold is turning the liquid into ice.
Yeah, so there's definitely something to it. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like the rhythm of life going through this plant. And so what Bose does next, he uses chloroform. He administers it to the fern, and then it has a similar effect again. So it kind of, I think it's kind of similar to when you use chloroform on a human being. He like knocked out the plant. And then he had an antidote. He doesn't say what exactly it is, but it kind of instantly brought the plant back. Yeah, and this is now where it becomes a bit more. Yeah, Priyank, do you want to say something first?
Yeah, that the antidote was revivifying. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but if the chloroform discontinued all growth and the antidote was revivifying, it really reminds me of how in meditation we're like antsy or nervous sometimes or agitated, and the impact of meditation is revivifying, isn't it? It allows us to get back into our normal calm state of affairs. And similarly, like if we allow, for example, if you allowed in this case the chloroform to like stay, then it would have probably killed the plant or whatever. But and similarly, like if in meditation or in our lives, if we continuously seek like stimulation, be that either dulling or like exciting, it's not going to end well, is it, for us?
Yes, or so they say. Yeah. Absolutely. And I wonder if it's beneficial for the plant if you meditate with the plant. Maybe it will make prolong its life for a while.
Lauren's plants must be doing really well with all that meditation. She's got loads of plants, listeners, you won't be able to see.
I do have
Yeah.
lots and lots of plants in here, but I have to say I don't actually meditate in this room. Only very rarely, so can't take any credit for their blooming. But they are doing very well.
Yeah, that's really nice. I also don't have any plants in my bedroom where I usually meditate. I have a few plants here, but mostly they make my cherry tomatoes.
Aren't they plastic, Mike?
No, they're real. They're real. But they don't make enough cherry tomatoes for me. I would need a whole orchard to actually have enough. And so now comes the PG-13 part. So because now I don't know, like, did you guys make an emotional connection with that fern when you read this? And now the next experiment is he takes a sharp object, he cuts into the stem, and that shows also it shows a reaction of like what you would expect. Priyank likened it to a cartoon, and it's kind of like it, right? Like first you get an intense reaction, and then slowly fading away until finally it ends in death. So yeah, so you basically usually when you cut off maybe like a branch of a tree, you don't think about it much, but you actually killed that part. And yeah, so next time you do that, think about that. Yeah, Lauren?
Something I was thinking about as I was rereading this, I was wondering what the karmic effects were of Bose doing all these experiments, because obviously he would have had to have done a lot to have come to the point that he has now. Because, he's essentially causing pain and death to plants, which we now know from his findings are living beings. So, yeah, my question to you all is, what do you think karmic effects were, and do you think it was weighed fairly in the hands of cosmic law, according to truth that he's discovered, or what are your thoughts? Go on, Reva, kick us off.
Go on, Reva, yeah, do it.
No, because I had a question based on your question, so mine's not an answer, it's another question. So Priyank, you go first.
Okay, so I often think about this because of my garden, I like to tend to it, so it looks very nice. But at the same time, I don't want to kill many things. So I'm always in this conundrum. And where I set my limit was, all right, I won't do any damage to any insects or animals, but if I need to weed, I'll weed. And similarly, I won't what's it called? I won't grow plants that I need to remove, if you know what I mean. I'll grow plants that are there and they can take over. So it just minimizes as exactly as what Lauren says. If there is any karmic debt, then hopefully reducing it to none. So, for example, I'd love to. I grew like 6 or 7 different vegetables this year, and the slugs got the majority of them. Like as soon as they flower, the slugs are all over them. But I don't want to put any slug killer down because then I don't want to kill the slugs. Even though even though when I buy the vegetables in the supermarket, no doubt that they use all this pesticide stuff to make it grow that well. But when it's like if you're the one doing it, I feel there's a different karma, I suppose, if that's the crude, compared to leaving it to the big farm industry.
That sounds very wise, Priyank. I think as a kind of set of principles, because I when I was reading this, I was like, oh my God. So I already, because like as a vegetarian, I always feel like, on the right side of the karma bit, because I'm like, well, I'm not harming animals. But now I'm like, oh God, now I've got to think about plants as well. But since I was very young, I always used to feel like the whole concept of bunches of flowers and giving flowers to people, I was like, that's a bit weird, isn't it? Because you're plucking the flower from living to do it. So I wondered what my question to you guys was, how do you feel? Because in so many ceremonies as well, they're involving like, bring a flower, which is obviously goes really, really way back. Like it's such a huge part of so many cultures. So it's obviously got significance and it's obviously beautiful and it's obviously really symbolic. but it's not bring a plant, is it? It's bring a flower. But then I guess the flower's not killing the plant, but it still hurts, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. I think we talked in one of the last episodes. We talked about the saint who wouldn't pluck flowers because he said he wouldn't want to hurt the plant, and there's definitely something to it. I don't know how big the amount of bad karma is for plucking a flower. Really, I would say it's probably not life changing, but I'm not the expert. But yeah, there's definitely something to it where you go, there's this flower, it's very beautiful. Do I really have to rip it out? And yeah, even though it's for a spiritual ceremony, but hard to say.
Me to refer Reva back to our previous episode. I found in the Luther Burbank, A Saint Amidst Roses, one of the things he does was that it convinces one of the cactus plants to shed its spines or thorns. So then it by giving it love, essentially, it's like convincing it in a safe place, etc. And he managed to produce this species of cactus, edible cacti, that didn't produce thorns. So obviously there's a lot of that's down to the intention, isn't it? So he wanted to promote like this feeling of peace and love around the plant, and he obviously then, but to do that, he no doubt he would have had to pull out plants that would prevent that cactus from growing, because he needed to grow the cactus, right? So you probably would have had to de-weed that area where the cactus was, but we unfortunately we're not told about his methods of de-weeding Luther Burbank's Saint Amidst Roses. But he would have had to do it, right? We all have to do it, lest we live in a forest. My wife wants to next year. We've got 2 vegetable patches. Wants to just make them wildflowers and just let whatever grows there grow.
Let's see how it goes. Interesting. I think that there are different rules for plants than for humans. Like, if you would take what Luther Burbank did with all his cropping of plants and mapped it to humans, then he would become Frankenstein, right? And that's not what it is. I feel like he created a lot of new fruits. He made fruit trees and nut trees more efficient, if that's the right word, basically making them give more nuts and more often and needing less water. And I think there's a role of the human being kind of changing the ecosystem to an extent, maybe in a way that doesn't destroy nature, but I think it's okay to research in this area without doing too much harm. That's my opinion. That's not backed up by any like text or ancient text or anything. This is just something that
What about to have a pristine garden? Do you think then that's worthwhile?
Is that worthwhile? An English garden like yours.
Mike, you yourself helped me pull out most of those roots when you were here. Do you remember?
Yeah,
it's all coming out now.
during the pandemic, we did mass murder on weeds and this old grass patches. Yeah, no, I think that's okay.
Took them to the graveyard.
Yeah. Also, one of the things that always strikes me when I visit any SRF center is their beautiful gardens. And I don't see weeds there or anything like that. Yeah. I'm guessing they must be weeding as well. I think that's okay. And nature, I don't know. I've seen patches where nature just grows wild, and it's not always great. It's sometimes just you need an equilibrium of different kinds of plants and animals that kind of keep each other in check. And if you don't have that, then you create something that is not great for anybody, not great for the plants. And
you don't like meadows, Mike?
Meadows are good, but what if they grow? What if they grow too high, or what if you have trees that try to grow there, and then the meadows grow so high and take away all their nutrients, and they basically things start killing each other, right? Would you say that's an interesting question? Actually, would you say the life of a tree is more important than the life of a patch of grass?
Depends on what the soil is and what the temperature is. What's meant to grow there, isn't it?
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree. That's a good answer. Speaking of trees, so now we go to the next level. So now Jagadish Chandra Bose, he talks about transplanting a tree, and if I don't think remember is the right word, but way ahead in the book, Luther Burbank talks about trees and how stubborn they are, right? How difficult it is to make a tree do something else because they have been growing in the same way for hundreds of years and they don't want to be changed. So he transplanted a tree by chloroforming it, and then I'm guessing he's chloroforming a branch and then cropping it onto another tree. Is that how you guys read that as well, or is that cutting off a tree and putting it into soil again? I'm not really sure what he meant by transplanting it, but
yeah, I think that's correct, because when I did it without chloroform, not trees, but like very established bushes, I want to take them from the back to the front, and more than 50% of them didn't make the transfer. They did not want to be moved. So I should have done this kind of thing, which is interesting because I had read this book like many times, yet I didn't put into practice this simple, very obvious instruction.
Oh yeah, I wonder if that's like also if you read about it in a scientific way, if chloroform is one of the ways that people do it professionally, or what people have been using these days, because cropping trees is very I would say a common place everywhere, right? I think that to get the kind of avocados that we're all eating, that wouldn't really work without cropping, and there's many other fruits where we actually depend on this method to actually get them out, because the wild fruit that would grow, they wouldn't be edible. So it is very important. And he goes on. He then talks about, he likens trees to human bodies in a way where he says there's a circulatory system inside a tree and instead of blood they have sap, and the sap is circulating through the trees. And I still remember that in school we learned that the sap movement in the tree happened through capillary attraction. And here he says that. He says capillary attraction is not an explanation for the sap movement. The only thing that can actually move the sap in the way it does, because it moves up and it moves down, is the living cells that push it from one to the next. And I'm not sure if our current I couldn't find a paper where this is confirmed. I don't know where science stands on this right now, but I'm not. I couldn't find any confirmation of this version, but it makes a lot of sense.
Mike, we have to take this as gospel. This trumps
as gospel
science.
Yeah. But I mean, we do that. But I mean, what about world science, the scientific community? I feel like if they would then adopt this, this would be a real confirmation of how ahead of his time Jagadish Chandra Bose was, right? And probably still is. I think that's one of the points, right? That he kind of says those things 100 years ago, and even now we're still struggling to confirm them. Yeah. And then he says there is a section where all the sap originates from, and this is like an actual heart. And So he kind of, it makes it more easy to see the tree as a living being rather than like an object, which he did to the fern before, the fern. And the next thing he does is he goes from the fern to the tree. Now he goes to a piece of tin, to a piece of metal, basically, and he uses the same methods. So, and he says the tin reacts in a certain way with vibrations. So basically, that the tin is alive as well. And I felt, for me, thinking the fern is alive, fine. Thinking the tree is alive, fine. Thinking the tin is alive is really difficult to kind of. This is like a real change in my picture of the world, because I would have not thought that tin is something you would apply chloroform to and then it would stop vibrating, right? But apparently in those experiments that he did, this is the effect that it has. And then he then says, he talks about the fatigue of the material. And we do have this in science. We have this whole part of our science in material sciences which talks about material fatigue. I didn't find anywhere a section where it acknowledges that the metal would be alive, but for example, when we have airplanes or when we have undersea cables, I think we talked about this before, we know that if we would fly them 24/7, they would break much faster than if we gave them periodic rest periods.
Alive is I think too big a word. It's more like vibrant or like buzzing or something like that. And the more like vibrant or in resonance it is with what it was designed to be, then it is more likely to achieve what we want it to achieve. So, so for example, this chloroform would change in some way the electrical properties of the tin, for example, and make it perhaps more resistive to current passing through it. Even if it's minute, we may not notice it when we're using the copper to light our lamps, for example. But if you put a, as Bose has done, if you did put a very sensitive instrument, then you would notice it. I mean, like previously, when he said when he was looking at his crescograph and saying how magnificent the magnification was, and he said if a snail's crawl were enlarged in the same proportion, the creature would appear to be traveling like an express train. And I thought, well, let me try and put some maths to this. So I thought, okay, express train back in those days, 70 miles per hour, 30 meters per second, do 10,000. And I thought, okay, let me get to the smallest possible field of view that you'd have if you were this small. And I got to like, that snail was going at like 3 millimeters per second, which is pretty good. And similarly, that fern. And similarly, you'd if you had a very delicate instrument for current, no doubt you would see minute impacts. Even if you put your finger on the conducting copper or tin, right? You'd notice a difference. Some current would flow through you, and it would be suppressed in some areas. And if you continuously put your thumb there every day for a year, then you'd have a gouge. You'd have a gouge in the metal and all those kind of things. So it's very subtle, isn't it? And he's talking about the really subtle realms here that no one's really interested in, because if it works, then it's working. And if it stops working, you replace it. That's the mentality of engineers nowadays. You've designed something.
Yeah.
You designed something. That. It's got an operational life, and in that operational life, you've designed it so it's got to withstand all this stuff that you're putting it through, not thinking about how to extend that in any way. That's more effort than just changing it.
True.
I have to say, going off of that, I feel like going over this last chapter, it's actually changed my relationship with how I interact with the world, because it becomes even more apparent that it's all alive, right? And it's all alive with God. And, it's so easy to, chuck your pen about and not really take good care of the material, but actually it's still got its own life and its own buzzing, and it's really struck me. And I think it's really interesting, because we realize that it's not as it appears to be. It's a hard one to explain in words, but I hope you understand my meaning.
Yeah, I like, just to your point, I feel like it just kind of reconfirms that kind of concept of oneness, and that we're all connected. And so just like there's life energy in us, and you think there's life energy in every living thing, it's like, no, there's life energy in every single thing everywhere. We're literally one thing of being alive. So, and that's quite a beautiful thing. But on the other side, it's like, oh my God, am I hurting this brick now? You know what I mean? Everything is alive. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a good word, Lauren.
A very good point, Lauren. It reminds me of how prudent it is to be gentle with all our actions, where we walk, how we move things, how we address people, every single thing. The more gentle we are, the better it's going to be. We listeners, we won't know this, but we had a Janmashtami Kirtan a few days ago, and Lauren and I were performing various instruments, and Lauren was using her instrument of the voice box very aptly, very beautifully. But I remember Lauren had to. It was, yeah. Maybe I'll get a clip and I'll play it at some point. But Laura, my wife was watching Lauren move off the altar, and she was in this really, really awkward position in between like a mic boom and between a harmonium, and there was like Sri Krishna's picture like in the way, so she had to navigate all of that. And obviously, she doesn't want to cause a big clutter and knock over the picture and things like that, or the microphone.
I hadn't even thought about that.
And she very, very delicately, like she got up and she moved really gracefully, slowly put her hand on one thing, her weight on this side and that. My wife was that she moved so delicately off the altar. It was like a meditation, just watching her move away from the altar. And it really, so what you said, what you've talked about here, Lauren, you seem to have been putting into practice, I must say.
Well, maybe then sometimes I'm, chucking things about, but that's really perceptive. Your wife is very, perceptive. Wow.
Lauren, I'm perceptive as well, because I really noticed that as well. Because I was like, I was like, I need to ask Lauren, is she like a dancer or something? Because you're so graceful, and first of all, there was two things I really liked. One thing was after you finished, there was like this kind of moment of like pause, like, which was really beautiful. And then it was like with such grace, it's like your toes were pointing and you like got yourself up and you got, I was like, oh my God, I literally like living for her getting off this stage. Because like every time you did it, I was like, I love this.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a highlight for me.
Nice. Yeah. So should
we may as well play it. Should we play it? Actually, let's play it at the end of the episode. At the end of the episode.
So yeah.
At the end of the episode.
At the end of the episode. Okay. Yeah.
Listeners, stay tuned.
Stay tuned for some amazing performance. Yeah. And in the book, it continues with Guruji seeing all this, being impressed by it, and then saying, isn't this the key to feed millions, to improve our agriculture, to if we better know how plants works, if we have this those means to actually see the reaction of plants, wouldn't that be a great way to test fertilizers and see if they are actually having an effect or not, or how the effect works? And to be honest, I don't know if that ever happened, if people actually use a crestograph to test different fertilizers on plants, but it might have. I do see that this is something that would make sense. And in general, Jagdish Chandra Bose, he was very ahead of its time, I feel, in his field, and some of the fields he created himself. And if we look at the book God Talks with Arjuna, he talks about, there's a section where we see how he clashes a bit with the establishment in science, and how difficult it is to bring certain ideas to people who are used to a different view of the world, I would say. Guys, are we ready to read this? Lauren, do you want to read the first section?
Yes. I can find it. No, someone else will have to read it.
Yeah, go on.
I'm flustered now. I don't know where I'm supposed to be finding this. Where was it messaged to me? Sorry, guys. Where is this?
I'll send it to you, Reva, once it's your turn.
Okay.
I'll start.
I can find it.
I go for it, Lauren.
In 1899, Bose began a comparative study of the curves of molecular reaction in inorganic substance and those in living animal tissue. To his awe and surprise, the curves produced by slightly warmed magnetic oxide of iron showed striking resemblance to those of muscles. In both response and recovery diminished with exertion, and the consequent fatigue could be removed by gentle massage or by exposure to a bath of warm water. Other metal components reacted in animal-like ways.
When Sir Michael Foster, Secretary of the Royal Society, came to Bose's laboratory one morning to see for himself what was happening, Bose showed the Cambridge veteran some of his recordings. The older man said jocularly, "Come now, Bose, what is the novelty of this curve? We have known it for at least half a century."
Sorry, that's me. But what do you think it is? Bose persisted quietly. Why, a curve of muscle response, of course, said Foster. Looking at the professor from the depths of his haunting brown eyes, Bose said firmly, "Pardon me, but it is a response of metallic tin." Foster was aghast. "What?" he shouted, jumping from his chair. "Tin? Did you say tin?" Then what happened? Okay. Sorry.
When Bose showed him all his results, Foster was as thrilled as he was astounded. An article in Asia magazine of March 1923 continues the story. Foster was overwhelmed. Boldly, Bose voiced his conclusion. Amongst such phenomena, how can we draw the line of demarcation and say that here the physical ends and here the physiological begins?
Such absolute barriers do not exist. If metals seem to live, what may not be expected of plants? This Indian who synthesizes the teachings of his forefathers with the revelations of modern scientific research finds that every fiber in a green, apparently sluggish mass of foliage is infused with sensibility. Flowers and plants cease to be merely a few clustered petals, a few green leaves growing from a woody stem. They are man's organic kin. Thus, the scientist's researches confirm not only Vedantic teachings, but the deep, worldwide philosophic conviction that beneath the chaotic, bewildering diversity of nature, there is an underlying unity.
At the close of one of his Royal Society addresses, after he had shown the complete similarity between the responses of apparently dead metals, plants, and muscles, Bose poetically uttered the conclusion at which he had arrived. "It was when I came upon the minute witness of these self-made records and perceived in them one phase of a pervading unity that bears within it all things, the mote that quivers in the ripples of light, the teeming life upon our earth, and the radiant suns that shine above us. It was then that I understood, for the first time, a little of that message proclaimed by my ancestors on the banks of the Ganges 30 centuries ago."
They who see but one in all the changing manifestations of this universe, and to them belongs eternal truth, and to none else, and to none else.
Beautiful. Thanks guys for reading this. And I think this is kind of the same point that Jagadish Chandra Bose is trying to make the whole time, is that God is in everything and everything is living. And I think if we have this attitude, then it will be not just easier to understand what's going on in our life, but also as a scientist, I guess. If you just expect life to be everywhere, you will probably be on the right track of research.
Indeed, it was a really, really nice article. But what led to it was Mukunda essentially says, why can't we influence various types of fertilizers on plant growth? Use your experiments. And do you not think that this is such a Mukunda's a teenager at this stage, and what a perceptive question, relevant, because no doubt he would have seen a lot of poverty, but most middle and upper class people don't think about the solution when they're in their teens. They may be like, do all sorts of charity and altruism later on, but not at such a young age. So it's such a creative question, isn't it? To think right now about what's going to like save the country, essentially.
He really has the perspective not of someone who you would think is a mere part of society, but more the perspective of a leader of a country, of a world leader who looks at the problems from a global scope and thinks, how can we alleviate those problems? And this is probably also shows what he's thinking about day to day. He's like, what are the big things that could alleviate suffering from this world?
Indeed. And he also really gets out the best from Bose, because like Bose agrees with him, and he essentially says that there's going to be millions of uses for my instruments, of which we'll discuss a little bit later, next episode perhaps. But he also says that the scientist seldom knows contemporaneous reward. It is enough to possess the joy of creative service. It's such a profound philosophy to live by, isn't it? That you don't think about the reward, but he's accepting that his work is for the future of humanity, not just right now, and essentially actually not at all right now anyway, because the scientific world is not yet ready to put into practice all these marvelous applications.
So definitely not for fame or something like that. I have to say, one of the reasons why I really like engineering and the scientific community is because I feel like most people are in it not for fame, but for respect, or they're really admiring nature, and there's a real interest, and there's a real love for research. But still, I'm pretty sure this is attitude that Bose has here, that he shows, it exemplifies kind of the ideal scientist.
So Michael, you've met my younger brother-in-law, who we went out for many walks with. You'll remember that he went to Cambridge to study engineering, and you'll also remember that he then, on his first day of graduation, joined investment bank and now at a hedge fund. What would you say to my brother-in-law if he were listening? Which he doesn't listen, I don't think, to this podcast. He may in the future. What would you say to him, Mike?
Kudos. Well done, sir. Tip of the hat. No, it's really, if you don't love it, then it's torture. But if you love it, then it's a dream. I feel like the career of a researcher, and I feel everyone needs to do the things that they love doing.
Mukunda certainly described this because he said that he expressed his gratitude to the indefatigable sage. So we talk about fatigue in metals, but Bose was indefatigable, however you say that word. Never able to show any or exemplify any fatigue. And that's another great philosophy to live by, isn't it? Lauren, you know, when we were doing the Kirtan day on Sunday, I was fasting that day, and I'd done another previous fast for 3 days ago. So I was doing no water as well that day, and you know, it was like insanely hot. And but the whole day I was not at all, not a single iota of tiredness, and I had such an insanely busy day that day. I was up at the crack of dawn, started my asanas in the morning. But yeah, it was I felt this, you know, when you've got like something really important to do, fatigue does not come into play, does it? No matter how much food or drink or water or how busy you've been over the past few days.
Wow, that's really inspiring. You're living off the power of God without feeling any fatigue. Wow.
Certainly you can do it at the center, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
In the same way, a teacher that is excited with a subject, I think Lauren would probably agree, is like the teacher that every student wants to see. And I remember I had a geography teacher in high school that was just so excited about everything, every country that we talked about. And he talked about numbers of population and GDP growth. And I loved that man. He was amazing, you know? And maybe because of him, it became kind of one of my hobbies just to research geographic facts and maps and all those kind of things. And I think those are the people who are in the right place in this kind of field in science and then also in universities teaching, because I also know what it's like when you're with a teacher who really doesn't like his job, and then it's not just difficult for the teacher, it's also difficult for the student, I would say. So it goes hand in hand. And Mukunda takes his leave, and he kind of he says a sentence. He says, "Can the astonishing fertility of his genius ever be exhausted?" As in, he's like an eternal spring of scientific discovery. And this is really a positive visit that Guruji did there. So because
Vishnu, you've got to turn it down. Sorry, guys. It's about the TV. I'm sorry, I thought I muted myself. Sorry. You have to cut that bit out. Sorry.
Vishnu. She wasn't referring to Vishnu as in the god Vishnu. She's referring to.
Maybe then it would have.
That would
the love of her life.
Sorry, that was my son. He suddenly decided to put the TV on really loud. Sorry.
That's all right.
Maybe then,
break your flow then.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would have thought it's part of the podcast.
It is. It's staying in, Reva, unfortunately.
Staying in, yes. We cut
keeps it real. People want reality.
Yeah, exactly. They want to know who we are behind the facade.
Yeah, they want to see the squirrels eating your
strawberries.
The strawberries.
Yeah. Massacre.
Did you set up a webcam in your garden, Priyank?
No, I don't need to. I can just watch them. They're there. The other day there was Reva, I told you there was 4, 2 from different families. I know them all quite well. 2 from different families that usually fight, and 4 of them, because there were so many strawberries, they were just gorging themselves and getting along harmoniously.
See, how do you feel in that then? So that's a difficult one, isn't it? Do you protect the strawberries or do you protect the animals?
There's going to be no strawberries next year in my garden.
you know, I've seen organic strawberry growers, and they use nets over the strawberries, and that might be a better way than using pesticide. Yeah, I think the strawberries like it more as well. They would agree if you look at them under a crescograph.
But hasn't it made you think a bit about when you're actually eating a vegetable, it's hurting it.
Oh gee, oh my god.
I've
Well,
got.
Gandhi,
Yeah, go on. Go on.
well, Gandhi had this, didn't he? Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure at one point he didn't eat anything at all because of not wanting to cause so much suffering. But then I can't remember the whole thing, but he didn't keep it up because the body must live. But yeah, essentially it is. But I was reading something the other day about how even though we're in effect like causing death upon vegetables and food, we can use it as an offering of love to the divine, and of the body temple that we've been given. So we can still spiritualize it in some way.
That's true.
If you're really into it, there is a science. Like, for example, Jains don't eat certain vegetables, like they don't eat root vegetables, because once you pluck out a root vegetable, it's gone, right? It's dead. And if you, in plucking out the root vegetable, you're also going to take out loads of insects as well. But if you take the inverse of that, where you eat an apple from a tree, or a pepper, these kind of things that we have, like either fruit or vegetables, then essentially, if it's ripe, it actually wants animals to take the fruit. It needs animals to take the fruit, not just to. That's why it's producing the sweet, the sweet meat of the apple around the seed, and that's why the seed is bitter. So we don't bite into the seed. We either swallow it whole or spit it out. And what happens then? You either fertilize it through your, nature's processes, or you spit it out and it grows that way. And the purpose is it should grow far away from the parent tree, right? And then genetic diversity. So there is, if you really want to get into it, there is an application of the non-violence principles even in virtually everything that we eat.
That is pretty amazing and beautiful.
I've worked on that because lots of arguments in vegetarianism. This is my one, bit of good facts that is irrefutable.
It's your trump card, Brienne.
Yeah. I don't like to use the word Trump anymore.
Yeah, but
You need to come up with a new word.
Yes.
Anyways, I think this is actually not a bad segue, because he continues then to talk about Bose researching the effects of medicines on plants. And then you would say, isn't that also cruel to the plant? I don't know what kind of medicines he tried. But he did say that you could use the plants instead of animals, because I think the animals are definitely more sensitive, right? And they would actually suffer more. And I'm not sure if we have reached that part in science yet, that we would do tests with plants rather than with animals. At least not 100%. I'm pretty sure animal testing is still a big thing. Annoyingly, also in cosmetics, where I feel like, why? Like, this is so useless. But anyways, they use it a lot, and so he gave an alternative. And maybe this is actually something that science will embrace in the next century, that we can, we know plants suffer, but I think there's definitely a hierarchy, right? Like of the importance of life. And I think plants are not at the top. They're more towards the bottom.
Humans are at the top of the tree, aren't they?
That's right.
So yeah, human spiritually, in terms of knowing God. Exactly.
Yeah. And this is kind of the last paragraph we're gonna do in this part. We're gonna continue. We have one more episode to come with the last part of chapter 8. but this is as far as we got here. One question I had for you, Priyank, from earlier is, like you said, Jains don't eat any root vegetables. Does it include ginger and turmeric and things like that?
Yep.
Wow.
So it spans.
Okay.
It's like a different branch off of like the Hindu faith, essentially, where they go. They're really hardcore. Like some of them even they wear they essentially wore face masks before they were invented in the West because they don't want to inhale any flying insects, or at least prevent as few, make as few as possible. And it'll also what's it called? A lot of them will have a brush, and where they walk, they'll brush the dirt away from where they're walking, so they don't step on any insects.
But is there a similar reasoning behind like eating before sunset? Is that so you don't accidentally eat something that's flying? Or no?
Oh.
What's the reason?
I think loads of people do that, don't they? Loads of scientists.
Yeah, but Jain people are strict about it, though, aren't they?
Really? I thought it would have. I'm guessing. I thought it would have been to do with when your last meal of the day should be, and what you should, as essentially how much food should be in your stomach when you're lying flat. Something along those lines. Even Guruji says you should leave the table a little bit hungry. Don't satiate yourself to fullness. It's also true because like the evolutionary process wants you to be full, doesn't it? It wants you to grow fat and have loads of reserves. So what happens is like the feeling of fullness lags the hunger. So you'll think you're hungry, but you're actually full. If you just wait 20 minutes, you'll realize you are full. But because we keep eating, and then we essentially overeat, and then essentially we put on weight. But you've got to like conquer that. Are
you practicing this, Priyank?
I have been trying for many years.
Wow.
Well, Priyank, you're so disciplined. I sat with you and we had lunch. I remember that weekend, the queer initiation weekend. And my children were very fascinated by your lunchbox, which is basically carrots and leaves and
exactly.
And tomatoes.
I have it so many times. Like I was sitting at Chipotle with Priyank, and instead of ordering a burrito, he would get out his apples and stuff.
It's literally like a proper yogi.
No. This is why I have to try so hard, because I'm not a proper yogi. I've got to do all these like side things to make it happen. But I've been recently been doing. My wife and I did this. We're on the 7th or 8th week of like a raw food diet. So just seeing how that goes. I've had to.
And how is it going?
Really well. I just did. I did my. This is completely off piste now. I did my what they called, those biometrics assessment at the gym where they tell you all your stats. I did it before and I did it after, and my metabolic age has come down. My body fat levels and BMR has improved. Everything, basically, you can imagine everything gets better if you have a great diet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So are you grinding almonds in orange juice?
That is a point of some clarification that's needed, because Mike, I think you'll be able to tell us, what is a ground nut in America that we know it of as in Europe?
Oh, I don't know. I use a food processor to grind the nuts.
No, Guruji, a lot of what Reva is referring to is that Guruji asks us to do fasts once a week on ground nuts and orange juice. And
I do that.
A lot of people grind the nuts, but ground nuts are also another name for peanuts in America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is that I thought it literally means grinding?
We don't know. I don't know.
No, I don't think that's what he meant.
You think you mean grounding nuts?
Grinding the nuts and putting them into the orange juice because it's easier to digest, I suppose.
If you're not sure, ask the mother center.
Yes, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We're not experts. Don't try this at home.
I only ate nuts that I found on the ground. I was like, oh, you did well.
Are you the squirrels in the garden?
Teleportation and transformation, Mike has got on his list of repertoire.
Yeah.
Transfiguration, or whatever it is, when you can transform.
Nice. In that sense, do we want to add anything to this chapter? I think we've done it justice.
Yeah, I think we have.
Okay.
Not chapter, this part. We still have one more part.
We have one more part to go. That's right.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Then should we listen to a bit of Lauren before leaving?
Oh yeah, we were going to do this. Yeah.
But thank you, Reva, for joining us. And this is somewhat of an exclusive, so not everyone's got access to this recording that I'm about to play. But here it is. We'll end it there. Thank everyone. Jai Guru. See you next time. Thank you, Lauren, for that.